have fully been hit by a whim to put a video on the internet, so this is that. Be nice to me. I, like the rest of the internet, recently read and loved John Green's The Anthropocene Reviewed. The book is a memoir structured as a collection of essays about different facets of the human-centered planet. He reviews things such as sunsets, scratch and sniff stickers, a hot dog stand in Iceland, viral meningitis, and plague on a 5-star scale. The book is deeply personal, will probably make you cry, it certainly made me cry, and is based on the podcast of the same name. If you liked that book and are looking for something to read next, I have 14 book recommendations plus 2 authors, just kind of in their entirety, that I recommend moving on from this book with. Some of them you've probably heard of and maybe have also read, but I thought I'd throw in some popular books along with some books that maybe you've never heard of. Obviously, if you really liked the writing of The Anthropocene Reviewed, you might want to read Green's fiction if you haven't already. I currently own all of them except Looking for Alaska. I don't know what happened to my copy. Green's work on the whole is very character-focused and introspective. If that is something you like in your YA contemporaries, I recommend. My personal favorite is Turtles All the Way Down, which follows 16-year-old Aza and is very much about the way that she processes her anxiety disorder. The next category of recommendations I have are books or authors that were referenced directly by Green in The Anthropocene Reviewed. I don't have everything that he referenced, obviously, just a selection. Green quotes a poem by Emily Dickenson in his book, and if you've listened to any of his podcasts or interviews with him or anything like that, you've probably also heard him quote this poem. Green talks about how formative reading The Great Gatsby was for him in his younger years, and owing to the fact that it recently entered the public domain, a lot of beautiful editions of this book are coming out soon or have just recently come out, and there are quite a few retellings on the market too if you don't want to go directly into the great American novel kind of thing. I currently only own Sula in the Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, but Green references his deep love for Toni Morrison and I think refers to her as his favorite author. I personally have only read The Bluest Eye so far, which was her first published novel, and I loved it and am very excited to continue on reading Toni Morrison, a gem of American literature. My next category of recommendations are books that are about the online experience in some way. I have 2 works of fiction and 3 works of nonfiction. Obviously, you knew this was coming. I don't think I would be legally allowed to make this video if I didn't recommend An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This book is adult science fiction. It follows April May as she discovers a robot alien situation called a Carl, and her video of Carl goes viral online and she experiences a taste of being famous online. This book discusses themes of what it means to be a person on the internet and how the social internet affects the individual. Also, mine is Hanklerfish, which just made me very happy. Next, if you're a fan of YA literature, I recommend Tell Me Everything by Sarah Enni. You might know Sarah from her podcast First Draft, where she interviews authors. Tell Me Everything follows Ivy, a high school student, interacting on a social media platform called Veil. The app allows you to anonymously share art to people within the same geographic area as you. Ivy figures out the identities of a few of the anonymous posters on the app and starts giving them gifts. This book discusses the real-world implications of online behavior and is just a delightful read. Next up, I'm moving to the nonfiction. I'm going to start off with Well, That Escalated Quickly by Franchesca Ramsey. You may recognize Ramsey from her YouTube channel, which is no longer active, or from her appearance on The Nightly Show, or from Twitter. This book discusses Ramsey's experiences as an activist online. She discusses having gone viral for a sketch video when she was a young adult. She discusses the positives and negatives associated with online activism and her own experiences with how activism can be done effectively. She specifically discusses things like calling someone in versus calling someone out, the differences and the ways in which each can be effective. I would recommend this book to anyone who uses the social internet for any reason. It is superb. If you read the Anthropocene Reviewed because you run in the online circles that John Green shows up in, I implore you to read Sorted by Jackson Bird, especially if you came from the Harry Potter fan community. This is a memoir focusing on Bird's experiences as a trans man. He talks a lot about transitioning, having an online public persona, and if you have spent any time in the Harry Potter fan community, especially back in the day, you will probably recognize Jackson Bird. The last memoir I have for you is This Star Won't Go Out by Esther Earl. I would particularly recommend this book to you if your favorite work of fiction Green has written is The Fault in Our Stars. This book is a compilation of writings Esther did throughout her childhood and her young adulthood experiencing cancer. Earl was very active in the online community surrounding the Vlogbrothers, and she talks a lot about being online and being a young person who's very ill. I read this book when it came out, and it was very emotionally impactful. It's a very interesting look at being a young person online and being a young person with a terminal illness. My next category of recommendations are memoirs that aren't necessarily about the online experience. Some of them do touch on being online, but I felt them more appropriate for this category. I'm starting out with Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. You've probably read this book. If you haven't, I super recommend. Sedaris's writing is very funny. It is quite incisive, and if you are anything like me, you will probably cry. I think this was the first memoir I ever voluntarily read, and it was recommended to me by one of my high school English teachers. You will begin this collection with essays about Sedaris's experience living in the US, and then move on to part 2 where he talks about living in France. This book is hilarious and personal, and again, will probably make you cry. Now we're going probably more popular than David Sedaris with Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. This book does have quite a bit about fan culture, which obviously overlaps pretty heavily with online culture. And you probably know Roxane Gay from her writing online or her very excellent Twitter presence. Bad Feminist is a collection of media critique essays. The essays in this book are about gender, race, sexuality, entertainment, and of course, Roxane Gay herself. I highly recommend this and Gay's other work. The next book is maybe my favorite memoir. I love this book so much. It's called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. You may know Caitlin Doughty from her YouTube channel and her series Ask a Mortician. I love her. This memoir is about her first 7 years working in the death industry, specifically her working at a crematorium. If that sounds upsetting or depressing to you, it is sometimes it is upsetting, but a lot of the times it's very funny and deeply interesting. I learned so much through this book and through her other 2 books and her YouTube videos. If you just want a memoir about a topic that you know nothing about someone whose life experiences are probably pretty different than yours, then oh boy, do I recommend Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Here For It by R. Thomas also touches on online life quite a bit. This collection focuses a lot on the experience of being othered, either from Thomas's experiences as a Black American or from his experiences being gay. This book is hilarious. It will probably make you cry, and it's what I read while I had to pack up my life in London to move back to the US because of COVID. This book is just going to be special to me forever because it was kind of like my friend while I was doing a very sad thing. Thomas's writing is so personable, and you will just absolutely be taken with him if you do not already know who he is. I cannot recommend this book highly enough, and I'm so excited to read his follow-up book. And my last memoir that I am recommending is Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This book is going to end up on my favorite books of the year. This book is about Ford's childhood experiences, growing up with an emotionally unstable mother and an incarcerated father. This book made me cry a lot. It also made me laugh, and it made me fall even deeper in love with the way Ford writes. I've followed her online for years, and I was so excited to finally get to read her debut book, and I cannot wait to see what she does next. The last book I'm recommending doesn't really have a category. It's a work of fiction, but reading it does feel like you're reading a memoir. It's called Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian by Hazel Jane Plant. This book is a little bit strange. It's structured like an encyclopedia, written by a trans lesbian as she processes the death of her close friend Vivian. The entries in the encyclopedia are either about Vivian's life or about a fictional television show called Little Blue that the two watch together. It's a deeply strange novel and will probably also end up on my favorites of the year. I'm glad I'm done because I'm a little bit sweaty because I'm potentially talking to, 5 internet people. Those were the books I recommend. If you enjoyed The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, I hope this was a little bit helpful for anyone looking for something to read next. Thanks. Bye. Again, please be nice to me. Whew. That was so hard. Whew. Whew. Hello, Mom.